Hello, everybody. How are we doing today?
Afternoon.
Good afternoon. I was actually mesmerized by the last breakout session I was in with Extron GVE, and yeah, time got away from me, so my apologies.
Yeah, you can spend a lot of time on that.
Yeah, you could. I mean, it's we have a mixture of Crestron and Extron here, and mostly Crestron, but enough Extron to actually use a GVE system. And I mean, I'm just getting into it now, and it's yeah, I could spend a lot more time with Mark, but that was a good session. So I want to welcome, I think, I'm not sure how much time I'm supposed to give for other people to join us, but you know, maybe I'll give them a couple more minutes since some of the breakout sessions are going over, if that's okay with everybody. I'll check my Slack channel here real quick. Okay. How you doing, Lindsay?
Doing well, just slow to get off mute.
Oh, that happens.
How are you over there this week?
What's that?
How have you been over there today?
It's been craziness. This has been the best part of my week, to be honest with you. It's just,
Absolutely. It's great to hear everyone coming together and having great conversation.
yeah, this is what these things are all about, and I love it. And I hope we have a good one here too, because for this session, just as a preview, is not necessarily me giving you information, but hopefully we can collaborate on information. Because I was given a problem specifically by my manager even just a couple months ago. And, you know, when you try to, and frankly, I'm really the only, there's two guys in our campus. There's me and another guy. They're basically the two AV techs. But part of my, and I'll say this as part of the introduction, but part of my responsibility is distance education and video conferencing spaces. And as a lot of people are well aware, that's some high price tickets that are high price options that are on those things. So of course, being having some challenging budget times, we have to figure out how we're going to reduce that cost overall. And that's kind of the topic of this conversation today, is how to try to reduce that overhead operational costs of these distance education and video conferencing spaces. I think I'm gonna get started here. I think it might be enough time. My name is Jason Unseth, by the way. I work for University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire, which is part of the greater UW system. I have been a part of that system for about 20 years now. I worked for about 14 years at UW River Falls, and then started working here about 6 years ago. And again, my chief responsibilities are learning spaces, and the subset of that would be distance education and video conferencing. And I kind of want this to be an informal group, kind of like what Noah did this morning. If any of you were on his camera, he did this camera, really good one. We were kind of changing ideas and information about camera choices for classroom spaces. And this is kind of in that same vein. The title of this breakout session is AV bridging, or really AV to USB bridging, and how you're able to get big, large spaces like distance education spaces. And I'm talking big ones, like ones that have multiple student microphones, you know, maybe up to 72 seats. We have one in particular. I think our largest DE room here is 72 students. And we've probably got, in that mixture, you've probably got 40 to 44 microphones, for example, which are all managed by a centralized DSP, or digital sound processor. And then of course you've got your multiple cameras. They're usually going through some sort of CCU. And then all those signals are usually routed through some kind of matrix processing switcher, such as Crestron or Extron or what have you. But the key component in any one of those is, of course, the codec. What's actually, you know, I was going to do this before we started. I'm going to bring up the participant list here. Can you raise your hand? How many, can I get a raise of hands, how you do it in Zoom? How many people work with DE or video conferencing on a daily basis on their campus? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, maybe. Okay, so just for the uninitiated, if you want to call it that, if you're not familiar with appliance codecs, I'm going to give you just a real brief synopsis here, and I'm going to share my screen here. Share screen. Everybody see my screen? I'll take that as a yes. Okay. So, but by the way, feel free to unmute whenever you got a question or a comment or what have you. So what you're looking at here is a picture of a Polycom HTX 9006. Now, appliance codecs come in all shapes and sizes. They, people make Tandberg, which I think now Cisco, Polycom. These are these bigger codecs. They give you a lot of functionality. They give you a lot of flexibility. Unfortunately, they also give you a lot of headache in the wallet in terms of dollar signage. So currently, for example, I've got 2 major ones in play on this university campus, which is this HTX 9006, and then, oops, that's the wrong one. Hang on. There we go. Or the RPG 700. So what these 2 codecs have in common is they have the ability to send baseband video, either being HDMI or DVI, into it for the cameras and the monitoring output, or actually also have the ability to send that line level audio into it and out of it, of course, because that's important. You need that 2-way communication through a codec, of course. So really, this thing is the heart of the system. It's what it does. It takes all those signals, brings it in, and of course, the biggest deal is it allows you to connect to the internet and join one or more codecs together, whether it be through an internet bridge or codec bridge, excuse me. And a lot of people use these things now. And like I said, they're great. Functionality is fantastic. The downside to them is they are expensive. They're anywhere in the neighborhood, probably around the neighborhood of $10,000 new. I think that has very little over the years, but it used to be $20,000, 15, 10. I think they might have even gone below 10 at this point, but they're still kind of pricey things. And then the thing that really gets people in the wallet is the contract. I mean, there's people that do set up service contracts like we do. We go through SKC, which is a great company, and they give us 24-hour, 24/7 tech support. They'll give us a single day shipping, basically overnight if one of these codecs dies, which is also fantastic. But if you add it up, and for example, our campus has about 20 codecs in operation right now. Now, for other campuses, that might be a small amount. For us, it is what it is. It's 20. And my manager came to me a couple months ago. This is just a couple months ago while we were planning the summit, and said something to me. She goes, "Jason, I want you to figure out a way for us to reduce the amount of these hardline codecs we have on campus. And I want to try to do it within a 2-year span, if all possible." So that would be going out and replacing, let's say 10 of them this summer, and then going out and replacing another 10 next summer. So within a 2-year phase, pretty much eliminate the need for appliance codecs on this campus. So, in typical style, I like to collaborate. I've talked to some vendors. I've talked to another group that is Wisconsin-based in the EW system called EMTC, and now I'd like to talk to this group. And so we've done a couple of these already, and I will bring up what we did as a solution. We used a Avadio AV Bridge Mini. This is the mini version. it's a nice little elegant solution. It has, your single HDMI input, which is your video input, baseband video input. You have the ability to send line or mic level signals. We'll be talking about line since it's a DSP output, in and out. It has the ability to be controlled via RS-232. It also has the ability to be controlled over the network. And it's a PoE device, which is nice. And this basically is your USB converter. So I kind of made a real, when I was doing my research, I said, okay, here's what I have, which is 13 of the Polycom RPG 700s. I've got 5 of the HDX series Polycoms, and I've got 2 of these life-size thing, which will probably be just straight out to a soft codec, but still needs something, it needs the ability to integrate HDMI or SDI, or probably, let's not even discuss DVI, because as one of my managers says, DVI is dead, and so is VGA. So the ability to integrate those baseband video and line level DSP audio signals into one device. And then the conversion to 3.0 is required for sure. I mean, a lot of computers now have 3.0 on them. Now, if you probably still can get them with 2.0, but 3.0 is just a requirement. And then, of course, the most important thing to the manager was be cost effective, if all possible. So, some people would look at it as a challenge, and I kind of do, because having the amount of codecs we have here, and some of these rooms are very, they're big, complex, but really it comes down to just getting it converted to USB for a soft codec option. So the first couple that we tried was that Vadio Mini. Very good box, and I'm happy with it. The only downside is it's about $2,000 a piece, or $2,100. I think at the time somewhere in the $2,000 range. So like I said, 2 are down, did really well. But unfortunately, it's because of, everybody's dealing with budget restrictions, especially with COVID. And so it's not really going to meet my cost-effective needs, unfortunately. So I can't go out and just buy 10 of those for phase 1 and then 10 for phase 2. It's just not in the budget. So I had something else here. Oh yeah. The other one is the Extron, the MediaPort 200. I've been playing around with it. I have it on the bench right now. I also like the way this operates. It has the ability to do HDMI, and kind of a nice thing, you can loop it through if you'd like. You got your line level inputs or mic line. You can take that line level output to wherever it needs to go. Here's your USB converter. It has the ability to be connected to the LAN. It also seems like it would do a pretty decent job, but then again, the price point on it, I can't remember the price point is right off the top of my head, but it's probably in that similar range. So any questions so far before I ask the big question?
I've got a question.
Yeah. Sure.
When you're using like the Vadio, or when you're testing with Extron, what are you using for room control, like switching your devices? I know so far maybe your focus is simply converting what you have in a room for AV switching to USB, or what is your managing room control? You know what I mean?
Well, yes, it's a good question. The managing room controller for pretty much all of those spaces I described is Crestron. And so yeah, so as far as I could tell, the Vadio has the ability to be controlled RS-232. So that would work out okay. The Extron also has the ability to control RS-232. So far, in order to control that AV bridge, it's handled over RS-232 just fine. I'm sure it could be done over IP too, though I haven't attempted it. But yeah, it's Crestron.
Okay, so you then have like an AV switcher in the background that's managed by a Crestron device. like picking camera sources and maybe flipping audio along with those sources. Then it's going to this to convert it to USB, right?
Yeah, and the whole idea is basically the system stays exactly the way it is to the point where you get to the codec. And we basically are just swapping the codec out for this AV to USB bridge function.
Okay, so your rooms already, so those 20 rooms already have in them an AV switcher that's controlled by Crestron. Okay.
Yeah, so the system's all there. Everything you just described, DSP, the audio, the AV matrix, all that stuff is already in the room.
Okay.
So all we want to do is just basically, take out the codec, slam in the AV matrix or bridging, if you will, and connect it to the controller, and that way you go.
So you're willing to get rid of all the other functionality you get from the codec, which is multiple outputs and all the different things, and just do a single output from like a built-in computer to a screen? You're not trying to keep all those other functions?
That is my understanding. Yep.
Okay. And the other thing about codecs, all right, I mean, codecs really have done what a lot of people are asking for, and they have that interoperability. So you can have a Polycom and I can have a Cisco, and they'll talk no problem to each other because they are standards based. What we're running into issues with is I can build this wonderful room around Zoom or a Zoom room and get all that fancy stuff. But then as soon as somebody wants to talk to, Teams or, Google Duo, well, no, it's not going to work. You have to be all in on that platform because it's really a cloud-based platform. Your appliance isn't really doing the lift. It's doing some local conversion, but really all the fancies are really being done in the farm in the cloud. And but in terms of just like, if you wanted, InnoGenie has a little Cam 300 that will bring in 2 USB sources and 2 HDMI sources. You can switch them. You can make a model switch, or you can, and it'll give you an HDMI that's all of that out, and it'll also give you a USB 3 out. So it would get you, multiple cameras, and if you wanted to put some USB things in, and they're not crazy expensive. They're a little.
Which one was that, Chuck? Which one was that?
The Cam 300, InnoGenie, INOGENI, yeah. And we're using that to bring in kind of non-standard devices. Specifically, the Huddly makes the little cameras for capturing the whiteboards. So then they come on a little stick and they shoot down. They do a really good job. They remove you and you can write on it, and it just shows what's written. It's really cool. And we bring those into these, and then that gives me an output. Gives me an HDMI out that I can do other things with, but it also gives me a USB out that I can present, so that if somebody comes in with a laptop, I have to be able to support laptops, and I have to be able to support a Zoom room in the same room. So all the devices, everything has to be able to go both places. And the Zoom room has 3 outputs. So when they're running off a laptop, their main output will just go to the screen in the front and the rear, and that's what they get, and then they manage it all just with their laptop, or if you had a single screen built-in computer like that. But when you go to a Zoom room appliance, which is nothing, you can get a Android-based one, but mostly the PC or a Mac with that can have like 3 outputs, and then Zoom will manage. You can have, who's talking here, your outgoing, and a big panel view and content. I mean, you can, and it'll switch them around, and but that doesn't mean you're cheap, because that costs just as much as building it with a regular codec, because you're basically doing all the same thing. This little Cam 300 probably would take all this infrastructure you've got and get it down to a USB for $1,200 or $1,300.
Yeah, the challenge with a request like this is you're not really given a target, right? So I mean, at least I wasn't in this situation. So it's kind of like, I don't want anything to broach surpass $1,000 per room or something like that, or 1,500. They just said, go out, see what sticks, and then we'll see if we can fit it into that operating budget essentially. So, by the way, I encourage anybody who's got links that, like Mike just posted, that would be great, to the chat as far as equipment, links to equipment. So we, as far as like, the cloud stuff is concerned, what's nice about codecs is that you can set them up to auto dial. You can set them to, dial specific IP addresses or SIPs, and that's great. And that's frankly, that's the functionality I hate to lose. But again, as Chuck said, all that fanciness is done with you in the cloud as far as Zoom or Teams or whatever you're using, WebEx. Yeah, so that's to me, it's the big disadvantage, is because you're converting all that video and audio for the computer, which is fine, but then past that, now you're dependent on the cloud, which a lot of people are doing. Of course, COVID's done that, has really climatized people that over the years. So after this, who knows, maybe people won't mind having that functionality going, or maybe they don't care in the first place.
Well, and like you were talking about big rooms. So if you've already invested in miking and everything you need for all the big stuff, that's the other issue we run into, is that some of our Cisco SX80 rooms, the automation for like the speaker tracking and all of that is built into that codec. So if you remove that codec, those cameras become a brick. They're not a regular camera. They need to talk to the codec, because that's where the artificial intelligence to figure out who's talking and all of that is all that software is in the codec. And so we have a bunch of rooms we were thinking about converting, and I think we're just gonna keep renewing our SX80s until they get to the end of life, because the cost to do a full upgrade on them is pretty crazy. We have a bunch of rooms that we're adding in Zoom rooms, and they want all the interactive monitors on both sides, and the big projector in the back, and multiple cameras, and have it auto switch, and that's the opposite of inexpensive and practical. Last summer, when we were trying to do small rooms, we put Poly Studios in and just put a mount and stuck it right in front of the instructor, and you plug it in and it works. It's been great. For the cost for performance has been outstanding with those. In our larger rooms, the next size up, it's still, we were putting them in from scratch, so that we had to do microphones and everything else, but we did the Vadio easy IP mixers and cameras, which is a great little package. Works pretty well. Like everything, all these things were new, and we had to do firmware updates on the Poly Studios. We had to do firmware updates on the Vadio. Everything, AV used to be analog and it just worked. You had to know how to set gain structure, but you were done. Now everything needs a firmware update every 6 months, and it's a whole different thing to deal with all of that. So, well, hopefully I said something that helps somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Chuck. Other ideas? Have other people tried to, think out of the box and say, okay, I want to try to, get this done, but I need to do it in a relatively cost-effective manner. And I heard one of my colleagues in the UW system actually started using Black Magic. I couldn't tell you exactly what it was. I never followed up with him on it, but he was using something along the lines of, and it sounded too good to be true. It sounded like he was creating a USB bridge with a Black Magic device, and the thing was only going for and I think it was also a mixer, video mixer, and I think it was $250 a piece, and
Okay, I can comment on that.
okay, that's good.
You guys got me up on screen. This is what it is.
Okay, there we go.
So I'm running, I've ran it a couple times. The downside with it is, and I just post, as you were talking, I was just posting that up on chat, but the downside, I went to one of our member campuses and he showed that to me in the room, and it's cheap, like you heard.
Yeah.
Then you get a Stream Deck and you can manage it through the Stream Deck. So, my goals, and I'm sure a lot of you have similar ones, is, how do you manage the room? Which is why I was asking before, how are you controlling this? We can have it software based, but nobody likes that because then it's layered behind stuff and it's hard to use. So if you get a Stream Deck and it's external of everything, that's wonderful. And it's independent. We're software codec based. That's perfect. That way people can use Teams, go to a meeting, who cares? And then the Black Magic, it'll, the ATEM box, it'll take 4 HDMI inputs, 2, they're like 3.5 millimeter jacks for audio in, takes 2 of those, and then it's out USB. But the downside is you got to load Companion and Stream Deck software. And then it's real easy programming. It doesn't take much, and you can save your profiles and push them out. But that's the downside. So on Minnesota State, I've been told that the general policy is, no, don't do that. You can't install whatever you want on their computers because IT won't let you. So I'm hung up right there, and I'm thinking maybe, in fact, I made a note earlier. I'm going to look and see if I can get like a little Android PC or some tiny PC box. I can just run this all independent on its own subnet with a PoE switch, and it's all its own system. That would be really easy. It wouldn't integrate everywhere, though. I wouldn't manage it everywhere, but it would be self-contained, just like a regular Cisco codec would be.
Sure. Yeah. And I know that's some IT departments are pretty restrictive on what you can actually tie to their.
Mm-hmm.
Thankfully, here we're not. That could be a detriment too, who knows? But so overall, it's been a pretty solid solution for you.
Well, yeah. If it wasn't for the software thing, I presented this to we have 5. I'm part of a committee with 5 colleges up here. They're going to join and be one college. So I'm part of the Distance Learning Innovation Committee. And I presented this to them, and right away it was kind of like being shot down. Well, there was a lot of people saying, this is great, this is great. And then someone says, can't install that software. I said, what? Why not? Oh, Min-State won't let you do that. Like, oh, good grief. Yeah. Get an exception, because the president should be able to say, no, we can install that because we need this. But nonetheless, that's its own issue. So that was a little disheartening on my behalf, but it worked fine. The only thing is for a larger room, and in my mind, these are large rooms. Like, what am I going to replace my SX80s with? Or if I have a Codec Pro in one room and they tell us we're not going to bridge this over Cisco anymore or over Zoom, which I doubt because we're paying for that anyway. But so what will be the solution for the large room that's going to hold 30, 40, 50, 70 people? And so that's what I'm always looking at, is the big rooms, not the little rooms. I can use a Polycom X50 or something on that. But for the larger rooms, that's the dilemma. What do we get by with? I've got a room next door that's used for a physics instructor, and it's all USB based everything. And it goes into a Mac Mini and it works fine. It's running the Zoom Room software. But if I just took that off and ran any software-based client, it'll work. And that was done cheap, like $8,000, and it's a pretty big room. But $8,000 cheap in my view, compared to a Codec Pro, where I drop 30,000 on a room right away just because.
It's all relative.
It really is.
Yeah, it's a relative situation. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for your input, Scott.
Yeah, but it does work good, and I'm tickled pink about the Stream Deck. I really like it. It's easy to program. It seems pretty solid up until I got one running right now, and I think it didn't like it when I went into breakout rooms because my controls for Zoom just dropped on me. But otherwise, it does a lot of stuff, and it seems pretty resilient. Aside from that, but that's what it is.
Are there any other applications that are good for that particular device besides DE? I mean, are you using it for other things too?
Oh, the Stream Deck?
Yeah,
it looks like it was geared towards people that are gamers and they needed buttons to stream their stuff to Twitch or whatever. I don't know. I don't do that stuff, but that's what it looks like it's made for. But if you use Companion, which is a software, I don't think I wrote it down. No, I didn't. Oh yeah, Companion by BitFocus or something like that. That gives you, they have a whole support list of, products that they build, like, I don't know, there's APIs for or something like that they
Yeah.
integrate with. So you can like pull over the button onto your Stream Deck and then,
It's just a bunch of macros.
yep, like a bunch of macros. So here's my mini one running, and it's got my zoom buttons on it. So it's zoom's one of them, and you can just pull those over. So when I was testing it, I had camera controls, I had presets, I had some real basic zoom controls all on one screen, and you could control all of that. It was really nice. And it had layers, so you could go pages deep if you needed to.
Like with when gamers do stuff in their like Twitch stream and stuff, sometimes they'll have animations come in, or like their face will pop out and be like, hey, thanks for subscribing, when someone subscribes, or whatever. So then whenever that happens, they can push a button for a macro and it just doesn't. They don't have to stop what they're doing and go and look through a bunch of things to try to get that animation to play. So it's just macros that just do it real fast, so they don't have it, so it doesn't interrupt what they're doing to be able to manage their live cast. So
Right, and the macros, you can run them for the A10 mini too. So you can set it up. So say you want a macro to run when you push a certain button, it could be video source 2, but then I want to take only audio from input 2 and not input 1 and 2, or whatever, vice versa. So you can, when you switch, the room that I saw this demoed in, when they went to student camera, their microphones lit up. When they went to instructor camera, it was only the microphones in the front of the room, and they were using the audio ceiling mics.
Sure.
So I didn't install it yet in a full room. I just set it up real quick one afternoon, did a little video demo, and sent it off, and that was all I really did with it. But it's promising. So I did order another camera to control with it, so I can get a little bit more of a full-fledged view of how it would work, and then a better temporary install-ish thing in place, so I can show other faculty and see what they think about it.
Sure. Okay. Excellent. Thank you. And there are lots of manufacturers out there, and some of them took it out themselves out of the running right away because they didn't fit some of those. Does it take line level audio? No, only takes mic. Does it take any kind of, separate audio at all? No, it's has to be HDMI embedded, So, and of course, there's a ton of them out there that'll just take, SDI embedded audio and video and then convert to USB, or a standard, a HDMI embedded video and audio, convert to USB. Unfortunately, the tough part here is, well, those are already set up. So I guess my only other option could be, I suppose, if I wanted to go real cheap on the USB converter, is to marry the video and audio together before it gets to that point. So take that non-embedded video and audio, basically use an audio embedder, I would suppose, and then go in that way. So I'd really be buying 2 devices instead of 1. Has anybody been doing that at all? Has anybody been taking having good luck with either embedding audio or de-embedding audio? In my case, I'd be looking more at embedding, but
It's
trying to
better
figure
than
that
it used
out
to be.
now.
pardon me?
I was just trying to figure that out now, because we have the Vadio Easy IP system newly installed in a dozen rooms, and I would 9 out of 10 of those rooms have a desktop installed in the room, but the teacher will come in sometimes and want to use their laptop, and everything was wired up to the desktop, which is generally fine. It's just a USB in front, and they can just plug it into their laptop, except for the audio. That doesn't work anymore. They can't, because they still want to play it like in the room and streaming and everything. And so I have like the room system plugged in with HDMI into the laptop, plus the USB for the Easy IP system, but I have to choose which port the audio goes in on. And we didn't really anticipate that before everything was installed, that we had to choose one or the other. So now we just got to figure it out.
We have some of those, and then we have people bringing in laptops, and we put in, Acroname makes a USB 3 auto switcher that can have 2 hosts, and then you can set a priority. So when you bring in your laptop and plug it in, it'll automatically switch from your built-in computer to your laptop. And if you just come in and use the built-in computer, it just works. Works great.
Which device is that?
Acroname is they make kind of an industrial USB switch, but it's got 2 hosts, so and it can be set as an auto switcher for USB 3, 3.1 or whatever.
It's one of the few ones that's reliable too.
Yep. Yep. Now Extron's going to have one too, but it'll cost more, and it's not out yet. But we've put a bunch of those in, and they've worked pretty well. You got some, right, John?
Yeah, I bought 2 of them a few months ago. So far, so good. I noticed Genie has got a new product similar to that coming out this summer. So hopefully there'll be more choices soon.
Yeah, it turns out that once these devices are putting out USB 3, it's usually uncompressed video. And so if you plug it into a 2-port, you don't get a very good picture. I think you start getting compatibility issues. The old USB 2 cameras that were the nicer cameras had compression built into them. And so it could fit a nice picture over a USB 2, but the newer cameras are uncompressed. And so you end up having to have that higher speed interface to get a good picture.
Any other comments on that? Things you want to share? On that particular aspect, I guess.
Yeah, I guess I'll always assume that somebody is going to want to bring in their own device to one of these systems and make use of it.
Sure, that makes sense. I mean, we're becoming
I just
very,
didn't know I had to choose first. Like, oh, the installer's like, where's this gonna be plugged into? It's like, what?
Yeah,
Yep.
we at first we were gonna let them like unplug from the built-in computer, but then it's like, what a pain in the butt that is. So it soon became apparent, and we had some Extron 2.0 switches, and of course that didn't work because of the 3.0 issue. So that Acroname was a good solution for that.
yeah, look into that. Thanks, Chuck.
Mhm.
So I guess it's also a general question. When it comes to your budgetary concerns with DE or video conferencing spaces, like what is your biggest challenge? I mean, I'm kind of giving you a very specific case study, but I was just curious if you'd be willing to share, what you like your biggest budgetary challenges when trying to maintain those rooms and keep them current and things of this. I just was pinged by one of my coworkers last week asking me how much it would cost to update a full DE room, and what the cycle rotation is, and how much it costs and all these things, because they're looking that far down the line in terms of budget. So I was curious to hear your thoughts on your challenges.
Mine?
Anybody's.
Oh.
Anybody can jump in. Anybody can tell me the woes. This is, it could be like therapy.
With us, it's always cost. We've changed our switch out dates to be 5 and 4, I believe, because we work with Health Science Center as well as A&M Prime. So we just have different times when we switch things out, but it's getting to the point where we're only going to start switching things out when it breaks because of cost. I mean, codecs have gone outrageous. I'm hoping that in the future, next 3 or 4 years, that the soft codecs will be reliable and well worth investing in, because right now, when you can only, I've been using codecs that are 14 years old that we're just now starting to replace, and you can't keep them operating that well, that old. And most of them are out of warranty, out of service. So we just replace things as they break now, which I don't know if it's actually cost effective, but it is when we don't have to replace them every 3 years or every 5 years. So.
You
If it's
muted.
not broke, don't fix it.
I've heard that before, because usually when you put new equipment with old equipment, the old equipment does not like the new equipment.
No, no.
Oh,
Everything starts breaking then.
Yeah, I know what you're saying about old. Out on the network, I have one Tandberg MXP left. But you know what? I held those out as long as I could because they were user friendly. They worked. They haven't been under maintenance for eons.
yeah.
I know.
So it didn't matter. Whenever
I
I
have 8 of
replaced
them.
another room, I kept it as a hot swap. So
Well-
it worked. But now I'm on my last one. And you know what? It's really a pain in the butt to try to integrate VGA or DVI to HDMI. You know what I mean? Because it's nothing works like that no more.
Nothing.
Well, it's like-
Nothing.
It's like the C40s versus the SX80s. The C40s had that nice user interface on it.
Yeah.
It was pretty easy just to mimic the remote and make something work. And you didn't have to get super fancy. And with the SX80s, none of this stuff pops up on the screen. If you don't have a T10 there or have to write this really elaborate control program. I mean, we've done some of our own control programs for SX80s, and they don't work nearly as well as a T10 does. The
No.
problem is you give them that T10 touch panel, and they have too much control because then they can mess it up.
Well, and mess it up quickly.
Yeah, so it's kind of like, when they walk into a room, they need to know it's going to work. I mean, that's always been
Right.
the most important thing. It's got to be reliable. If it doesn't work, that's a fail. That's like going to a concert, and if no lights tonight, well, you can't have the concert.
Yeah, when
And,
you go to a Willie Nelson concert and he's too drunk to sing, come on, people. No. No, I know exactly what you mean about faculty coming in. If it works, you never hear from them. And you're the greatest team in the world. The minute it stops working, your department's the worst. Believe me, many years doing this, it's a lot of fun.
Yep. You asked about costs though, and we have this, like all places, some departments have nothing and you're trying to help them out, and some departments have money to burn and want the very best and the most complicated stuff that you can do.
Right.
And my problem is I'm asked to put in things that I know they're never going to get the value out of. They say, oh no, we have to have this because it's the latest thing. It's like the 3D immersive simulation rooms. Super cool, man. It looks really great. And the first thing I ask them is, well, what are you going to put on it? Who's going to generate all your content? Because I can build you the room, but if you got no content, it's going to do nothing.
Yeah.
But they think this is what they want because they've talked themselves into it. Wouldn't it be great? I'm like, yeah, but you need 4 FTEs generating content for you. So unless you've got, a whole crew of programmers and visual artists to generate content to go into that, that cave, you're going to end up with, something that, it'll be obsolete in 5 years, and you'll be trying to figure out what to do with it.
But Chuck, they can say they have it though.
Yeah, exactly. That's it.
Yep.
That's it.
I mean, technology is wonderful. I mean, it's great. But if you're not going to utilize the technology for what it's really meant to do, not just a thought in your head, it's a waste. You have just wasted not just money, but time and technology.
Yeah.
That's why I've always asked people, how are you going to use it? What's your curriculum like? If you're going to do this, how are you going to have your students interact with this? Or how are you going to have your students do that? And
A
it just
few years
becomes-
ago, when touchscreens, large format touchscreens became the rage, we went around and put large format touchscreens, like 65, 75s into conference rooms, put a
Right.
whole bunch in. And then I came back a year later and I went by all the departments to ask them how they liked it. And usually I got, it's a touchscreen? They forgot. They had no idea it was a touchscreen.
I'm sorry, that's just so typical. It makes me laugh. You mean it can do that? I just didn't know.
So-
5 years
so-
later.
The other big feature I used to put into all the conference rooms, I mean, you put in this really nice biamp DSP. It's got a telephone interface. So I'd put on the touch panel, I'd put a conference phone, a whole room conference phone. I'd go back a year later, 2 years later, I'd walk by the conference room and I look in and there's one of those polycoms sitting on a desk. And I'm like, it's got a whole room system and they've forgotten it. Yeah, so I bring them in, I say, here, look at this, click, the dial tone comes up, we dig, and there it is. And they're like, because they forget it, even though it's easy to run, if it's not where they think to look for it.
Right.
It's like, when they want a phone, they look for a phone.
Yeah, it
Where's the
doesn't look like a
phone?
phone, Chuck. You should put in a
Exactly.
fake phone.
That's what, a picture of a big phone. Yeah.
Yeah.
But
I like
this
that.
does play into the whole conferencing thing, and in that when you're doing these things, if you take all this technology and bring it down to USB and you plug it in, if you're not giving them all the support they need to know how to go into their app, change the cameras, you have to go, oh no, you can go down to that little chevron and you can choose whichever camera you want. And there's 3 cameras going to show up: a document camera, a student camera, or an instructor camera.
Right.
If you don't train them, you can supply all these things, but they'll forget it. They won't know how it works and you'll have trouble.
Yeah,
And I
that's,
think
that,
part of that is age. I mean, if you look at faculty at a lot of universities, they are much older and they're used to doing what they want, how they've always thought. Give me, a whiteboard, give me this or give me that, because that's what I'm comfortable with. And trying to get people to use the new innovations and build their curriculum around it is like pulling teeth.
I kind of resent
Can't
that.
do it.
Todd, we just need a better interface from you guys. Come on. I want a really good auto tracker that has full AI in it that I don't have to control, that I can just set and shoot to the thing and it'll just give me the picture I magically want.
Yes, it's on the way. It's on the way, buddy.
I'd rather just use my mind and let it know what I'm thinking and do it. Thank you.
Yeah.
and be inexpensive too. That would
Exactly.
be fantastic.
Oh, yeah.
Pretty fast.
And yeah, price reasonable, right?
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
cost effective.
Cheap.
I've heard that term many times. And a lot.
Yeah.
Cost effective.
Everything's cost effective, depending on how you use it. If I'm gonna use this appliance 2,000 times, it's cost effective. And if I'm gonna use it twice, it's not.
Yeah.
Plain and simple.
That's a good way of looking at it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cost effective, like saying cheap. It's like saying used versus pre-owned,
Well, I mean, I'd love to go out and buy 10 of your bridges tomorrow, right? But apparently the budget's not there for that. So they want me to go out and buy 10 of something so we can do 10 of these rooms this summer. I'd love to be able to do that, but I can't. So I got to figure out, that's the challenge, because I would rather do that. I would rather go out, buy 10 Vadio AV bridges, done. Do the same
Right.
thing next year, but apparently the budget doesn't support it. So, what do you do?
So the question is then, do you do 4 or 3 the right way? And then just push out your upgrade window a few more years? Or do you try and come up with something that really cuts a lot of functionality out of your space?
Right.
Because you're going to be abandoning, if you go down, you can get a USB or an HDMI to USB converter as long as the audio is embedded in that, or even even have some with the separate, 1/8-inch stereo. You plug it in, there you go. It's, it's basically what you're presenting to your codec now. But all the rest of the system's going to go and do nothing,
Right.
So you go
Exactly.
one step beyond that, you get a few more features. You know, what's the value there? If you know, what's gonna be best? You have to, I always think, what's best for the students? What's gonna give, not only
Yeah.
does the instructor be able to do it, but what is gonna give the best result for, if you were sitting in the audience and is gonna give you the best experience. I mean, they're paying, you know, tuition dollars for every hour they sit there. So, you know, you've gotta, we gotta kind of give them their show, I guess. It's not just
Oh,
the
yeah,
content.
Yeah, absolutely.
This might not
Sometimes
be
you
the,
have to-
this
Go
might not
ahead.
be this might not be the right forum to ask this question, but I'd like to talk about this sometime, and that is, to what degree does this technology, the level of technology you offer, make you more competitive for the business of the customers or the students you're trying to attract? I'd like to talk more about that sometime, maybe not right now, but to me, that's got to play into the plans of the people that run these colleges.
Um, I'm a firm believer in that the students that we teach bring into the classroom the way they want to be taught. We don't set up classes in the way that youth today learn. We set up classes that the youth of the 50s learned. Whiteboard, you know, PowerPoints. How many professors are still using PowerPoints? How many of them put up a PowerPoint, teach from that PowerPoint? That's the end of the class. I'm sorry, most students are bored with that. Most students don't like that. The technology gives us the ability and the opportunity to teach them so they learn and so that they retain this information. But when you don't have faculty using the technology or willing to learn the technology to teach their students, you will always have them failing as far as technology. I mean, when I grew up, I remember the first calculator. That's how old I am. I remember rabbit ears. I remember all of the things that we didn't have. I never had a personal computer. The first one that I ever saw was an Apple IIe. I mean, but nowadays, my 11-year-old has a computer, has an iPad, has a phone, has this, and she knows the technology better than my wife. So why are we not utilizing that? Why are we not utilizing that knowledge? If I want to know something, Google. I now know what you're trying to teach me. But just because I have that knowledge, that I know what this means, how can we now take what that means and integrate it into your learning? How can we say, this is what it really means, but what does it look like out in the real world? How are you going to actually use this? That's what most college students ask you every single day. Well, how am I going to use this? Why do I need to know the aquatic, whatever? And that's really what they say. Well, why do I need to know this? Because we're not incorporating the technology into our teaching and into their learning. Look at them. They do so much on computers because they're interested in it. But when it comes to school, they're learning on PowerPoints.
I know that my daughter is in her second year at Jason's school there at Eau Claire, University of Wisconsin-Eau Claire. And, you know, one of the, I won't say the biggest, but probably one of the bigger reasons she chose that school was because the case they made for her in terms of the technology that's available and being able to stream and do some work from home. And this is before the pandemic.
Right.
And so I do think it becomes a business proposition for these schools that you folks work for as well.
Hey, I mean, think about this. If I have a lecture hall of 200, right? And I have that lecture hall filled up, but now I'm also videoing this to another 200. Now I have tuition for 400, not 200.
Right.
So, I mean, when you come to cost effectiveness, if you're going to do it that way, then yeah, it's really cost effective. But if you're just going to have it for a maybe, then it's not cost effective.
Well, just, you know, if someone doesn't feel well, they wake up with a fever that morning, they don't feel bad enough to not do anything, but they don't want to go in, you can stay home and stream that class and do it online. I mean, that's a big attraction to somebody who's getting ready to spend money on tuition.
Yeah, College of Pharmacy, they record every single lecture and put it up on the web. So in case a student wasn't feeling well, or in case they missed something, they can go back and review the lecture as many times as they want to get what they've missed. Yeah, there's the other side. They don't go to class and just review the lecture, but then that's their personal choice.
Excellent. Well, this is a great conversation. I hate to cut it off here, but I've been given the red light. So that was a great conversation. Thank you very much, everybody. And remember, there's door prizes coming up. So go back to the main room right now. Go back to the lobby, and hopefully you win.
Thank you, Jason.
All
Thanks,
right, take care,
Jason.
guys. Thank you.
Thank you.